Good afternoon, everyone. We are the reporter of the Raiders of Sulu. Allow me to read my notes. At the end of the module, we are expected to analyze the content and context of the documentary film. Number two, discuss the misconception related to the Riders of Sulu and explain the historical and contemporary relevance of a given source. So, we live on a pluralistic world and a conflict-torn world. Sad to say that some of these are the open-armed conflict and bloody resistance between Muslim and Christians. The gap of these two religious standpoints was undeniable huge, but what really happened in the gap of these two that it seems to continue years after until today? How and why these Muslim people were called pirates and riders? Are they really what they call identify the riders of the Sulu Sea? So, for this lesson, we are going to examine an historiographic documentary film that exhibit how the tribes of men or certain parts of Mindanao firstly fought against the Spaniards whom at that time colonized the Philippines. This documentary film was narrated by several key informants that made the film more understandable by actual being a part of it. These people studied and analyzed the whole history of the conflict and identified cases of it. The one author of The Rider of Sulu Isuli Gloria Dorano Borja Estrada, was born in Zamboanga City and was 17th generation direct descendant of Vincent Alvarez, the hero of Zamboanga City during the Spanish-American War. She earned her first degree at Western Mindanao State University of Bachelor of Science in History Education, then continued finishing other degree of at Pilar College, Zamboanga City, University of the Philippines, Diliman College of Fine Arts, major in art history and Ateneo de Zamboanga. She is a collector of art and is a member of the National Commission on Museum of the National Commission for Culture and Arts of the Philippines, president of the Mindanao Association of Museum, and for many years was a curator of art museum exhibit in the Philippines and abroad. The second one is Dr. Samuel Kong Tan. Is a Samal Tausug Chinese Filipino born in Saisi, Sulu. He earned his master's degree in history at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and his doctoral in philosophy in this interdisciplinary studies in Syracuse University, New York, USA. He is a published author and served as the chairperson of UP Diliman's Department of History and was also the chairman and executive director of the National Historical Institution in 1998. He is well known for his famous book, A History of the Philippines, briefly describe the human history and culture of the Philippines, focusing on three Filipino culture communities, the Moros, the Indos, and the Infilis, and examine how this group reflect country, history, and development. So, he shared his view about the colonial depiction of Moro slave riding in the Philippine coastal town, where it demonstrates the open armed resistance to the colonial rule of the Muslim. So the third one is Prof. Barbara Watson Andaya, born on June 7, 1943, is an Australian historian and author who studied Indonesia and maritime Southeast Asian history. She had done extensive research on women history in Southeast Asia, and of late on the localization of Christianity in the region. She received her Bachelor of Arts and Diploma of Education in Asian Studies from the University of Sydney. She also earned her doctoral in philosophy in Southeast Asia University at Cornell University with a specialization in Southeast Asia history and got her master's degree of the University of Hawaii. She teaches courses as a full-time professor in Asian study and as director of university University Center for Southeast Asia Studies. She was the president of American Association for Asian Studies from 2005 to 2006. So the next one is Dr. Julius Bautista. Is currently appointed as a senior lecturer at the Department of Southeast Asia Studies at the National University of Singapore. He remains as associate of the Religion and Globalization in Asia Context Cluster of Asia Research Institution. He is an anthropologist and cultural historian who earned a doctorate degree in philosophy in Southeast Asia Studies from the Center of Asia South Society and historian at the Australian National University. He was a visiting fellow at So for Halman Abubakar is a tausug and a town councillor of Hulu Sulu and is a member of educated Abubakar clan of Hulu. He asserts that the attacks on the Spanish force were the moral reaction to Spanish and American imposition on the Moro people. He promotes indigenous martial arts, silat, historic and significant on tausug-bladed weapons as a form of self-defense and glorified the historic and symbolic significance of this weapon. He also shared the sentiment of his people by resenting the characterization of Western colony and Philippine historiography as pirates. So for Dr. Margarita Tintin Arcuanco is a Filipino politician, philanthropist, and socialite. She was a former chairman of the Kabalikat ng Malayang Pilipino o Kampi Party, was governor of Tarlac, and was an undersecretary of the Department of Interior and Local Government and a member of the Council of Philippine Affairs. She is a columnist in the Philippine Star who was candidate from a set in the Senate in 2013 Philippine Senate election. She studied at the University of Santo Tomas with a doctorate degree in philosophy of public safety. She is known for her humanitarian project and works among Muslim communities and her participation in the peace talks with the Moro National Liberation Front.
On December 8, 1720, the southern region of Mindanao were occupied by Spanish soldiers that were then identified as Zamboanga City. It sits at the tip of the southeast peninsula of the Philippines that was protected by the city's fort pillar, a 10-meter high wall that acts as a defensive fortress. The fort served as the base of the operation to check on slave breeding going on the north and back. King Dalasi was the king of Bulig in Maguindanao who led in attacking the fort pillar, together with the forces of the Sulu Sultanate. Burned the town around the fort, cut down the line of provision for the Spaniards, and began a war against the soldier inside the fort. Dalasi's soldier fight with the vigilance of desire to rid Zamboanga City of the Spanish forces. They really had to suppress the Spanish presence here in the peninsula because the fort was their base of operations. According to some historians, slave breeding happened in the Philippines long before the Western power arrived, but it was never whispered productively. The arrival of Spanish and the desire to dominate trade in the region triggered slavery. The Spanish referred to the slave raiders as Moros. If they were from different tribes, they would be challenged the Spanish authority for occupancy. The pirates that were described by the colonial powers involve activities of different tribes in the Maguindanao area as well as the Sulu archipelago. These three Muslim groups were the Balangini Samal tribe, the Ilanus, and the Tausogs. The Ilanus and Balangini Samal group were both long-standing seafarer communities and would often join forces with the Tausug that is known for fierce warriors. All of the practical attacks and retaliatory attack conduct from Sulu and Maguindanao always carried these contingents. History also questioned, should this raider from the south be called pirates? Do these raiders fight for personal gain or just serving their local political matters? The documentary informant stated that pirate is misleading because it doesn't cover raiders and people who acted on behalf of the state. It was then concluded that the Moro acted as a retaliation against the foreign occupier that was sanctioned by the Sultanate in the name of a higher course, the Islam. There were also certainly great deal of pressure from the south of population in the Visayas to become Islamized. But the presence of Spanish in the Visayas and northern Luzon disrupted the spread of Islam. A Spanish colonial administration, through it was their responsibility to prevent the spread of Islam from the south to the Christianized population in the north. They have impressive in power that their conquest is not only motivated by these colonies but also the opportunity to propagate Christianity. Therefore, Christianity deploys quickly displacing Islam and indigenous tribal beliefs. The Spaniards weren't concerned about what the people in the south were after, but rather was really more than that really undermined the commercial interests of the region. Through this, they gained new power in the region which was exerting its own agendas that its own influences. However, the Sultanate in the south were wanted to do was to maintain the power, if it not, increase it a little bit more. Both sides used religion ideologies to further influence and feed their objectives. Behind the clash of religious doctrines, that was more compelling reasons for the Spanish to bring the slave raiders to the hill. The spoils of trade with the Orient, something that Spanish wanted to full control of. In many respects, the Spanish wanted to be a part of the exchange in trade but also wanted to do in a conjunction with a conversation of religious perspective and mindset and colonization of our islands. And now we are going to discuss the content analysis. The documentary film addressed the resistance of the people in the south, the Moros from Spanish-American colonial force in the southern region of the Philippines. First, the Moro people are not really pirates or rebels but indigenous people who demonstrated resistance from the Spanish forces. Second, the most celebrated attack was the December 8, 1970 attack by King Dalasi. The Moro Act was a retaliation against the foreign occupier and was sanctioned by the Sultanate in the name of higher course, the Islam. And fourth, Spaniards were concerned about the commercial interests of the region and propagate Christianity. Fifth, slave trading was a part of bigger regional Fifth, slave trading was the part of a bigger regional trade in the island of Southeast Asia. 6. Artifacts originating from China that was found in Butuan City are proof of the great distance traveled by the seafarer of Sulu and the trading activities were involved in. And last, number 7. The Western colonial ruling stand open-armed conflicts in the western region of the Philippines causes the impoverishment of Muslim areas economically and religiously.
Good day everyone, now I'm going to discuss about the warships and weapons used by the raiders. First one is Lanong. Lanong is the first vessel that were used by the raiders. The Lanong ship used by the Iranon and the Balini people of the Philippines, and it is also considered the biggest ship. It could reach up to 30 meters or 98 feet in length with 6 meters wide hulls. Each had cannons mounted at the bar and had 2 pipe-shear masts which doubled as boarding ladders. It has 24 oars at each side rowed by captured slaves that serve as their flagships. Each vessel carried 100 to 150 men including a captain, soldiers, and slaves to row and capture local slaves to navigate unknown waters. The vessels were specialized for naval battles. They were prominently used for piracy and slave raids from the mid-18th century to the early 19th century in most of Southeast Asia. Large lanongs were also inaccurately known by the Spanish as Joangas or Joangas. The name lanong is derived from Lanun. Lanun is an exonym of the Iranon people. The second one is Garay. Garay is the traditional native warship of the Bangi people in the Philippines. These are the fast attacks boats of the Somalian tribes. They were made of bamboo wood and nipawal and could carry more than 100 sailors. The ship was 25 meters long and 6 meters across and has the power magazine and cannon at the bar, which 30 to 60 cars in each side. The Garay was faster than any other sea-going vessel of its time. In the 18th and 19th centuries, they were commonly used for piracy by the Bangi and Iranong people against unarmed British ships and raids on coastal settlements in the region surrounding the Sulu Sea. They are smaller, faster, and maneuverable speeding boats replaced from the Juangas. The name means scattered or wanderer in the same language of the Bangi. The third one is kakap, also known as salisipan, is a canoe-shaped boat which sometimes have a triggers. They are often used by the Iranon and Bangi people of the Philippines for piracy and for raids on coastal areas. They are usually part of fleets with larger mother ships like Panggajava, Garay, or Lanong warships. Among Malays, this type of boat is used as a boat of war or passenger boat. Raiding fleets are used as auxiliary vessels, and these boats were used to collect manpower and ships from friendly raiding bases along the way, eventually building a fearsome and organized sea force. The second topic is ancient weapons of the Moro people. The first one is kalis or kris. The sword is more than 300 years old and it was used during the time of the Spanish colonization. It is a weapon for warfare and servility. It is 2 meters in length and was carried not only by slave raiders into battle but also nobles and high-ranking officials of southern sultanates. Its double-edged blade is used for easier slashing and penetration to the bone that would stick, so it's very hard to pull. Second is barong. Barong is a deadly weapon and a sword with a single-edged leaf-shaped blade made of thick type of steel. It is also a 1 meter long weapon that was used to enclose hand-to-hand battle to cut Spanish firearms down to size. This weapon is used by Muslim Filipino ethno-linguistic groups like the Tausog. Third one is kampilan. Kampilan has a distinct profile with the tapered blade being much broader and thinner at the point than its base, sometimes with a protruding spikelet along the flat side of the tip and bifurcated hilt, which is believed to represent a mythical creature's open mouth. At about 36 to 40 inches or 90 to 100 centimeter long, it is much larger than other Filipino swords. Both the kris and kampilan are used primarily by Muslim groups in Mindanao, such as the Maranao, Maguindanao, Tausog, Yakan, and Sama. They were utilized to fight against the threat of raiders and later on to resist against the Spaniards who attempted to subjugate the Moros under the colonial rule. And lastly, the armor. Armor was made from the carabao horn. Its steel plate was molded to fit the body and held together by the chainmail. It could also deflect the blows from a sword but useless against firearms. Third is the ancient weapons of the Spanish forces. First is musket. The musket was highly effective in battles against indigenous peoples as it provided the Spanish soldiers with a significant advantage over their opponents. The indigenous peoples often had less advanced weaponry such as bows and arrows, which were less powerful and had shorter range compared to muskets. With the musket's long-range capabilities, the Spanish forces could effectively engage in combat from the distance, reducing the risk of hand-to-hand combat. This allowed them to maintain a tactical advantage and often resulted in the successful conquest and control of indigenous territories. Number 2, cannons. Cannon is a type of gun classified as artillery that launches a projectile using propellant. In the past, gunpowder was the primary propellant before the invention of smokeless powder in the 19th century. Cannons vary in caliber, range, mobility, rate of fire, angle of fire, and firepower. Different forms of cannon combine and balance these attributes in varying degrees depending on their intended use on the battlefield. The three Muslim tribes, Balangingi Samal tribe. The Balangingi, also known as Northern Samar or Northern Sinama, is an ethno-linguistic group living on the Greater Sulu archipelago and the southern and western coastal regions of the Zamboanga Peninsula in Mindanao. In the early 19th century, an entire ethnic group, the Samal Balangin of the Sulu-Mindanao region, specialized in state-sanctioned maritime raiding, attacking Southeast Asian coastal settlements and trading vessels. This paper traces the process of the formation of the Samal Balangini as an ethnic group comprised of pirates and their captives, and their continued sense of belonging to the island stronghold of Balangini, even after its inhabitants were forcibly resettled between 1848 and 1858. The second one is the Ilanus. The Ilanun, called Iranun and Ilanun as well, are closely related culturally and linguistically to the Maranao and Maguindanon. The Ilanun language is part of the Austronesian family that is most closely related to Maranao. When the Spaniards left, however, contact between the Maranao and Ilanun decreased. Lastly is the Tausog tribe. Tausog is a combination of Tao and Suog, the old name of Holo Island. The present generation of Tausogs are believed to be descended from the different ethnic groups that had migrated to the Sulu archipelago. Traditionally, the Tausog are sailors, pearl divers, and traders. Their ancestral homeland in the Sulu archipelago have vigorous tidal currents that flow from the Sulu and China Seas to the Celebes Sea. This translates literally into the name people of the current. This native tribe, the first group in the archipelago to be converted to Islam, possess a courage that is beyond doubt. Their bravery is supposed to be unquestionable. Therefore, the Tausog are often named Taumaisog or brave people. The subtopic for this chapter is the Fort del Pilar. Fort del Pilar is a 10-meter high fortress and sprawled over 2 ergs. One of the most celebrated attacks on the Fort Pilar is the 1720 attack by Maguindanao King Dalasi, the King of Bulig in Maguindanao. At the time Fort Pilar, Father Rivera's The Masterpiece was abandoned in 1663 and rebuilt in 1718, and was for centuries a defense against Muslim, Dutch, Portuguese, and British attacks. It was in disrepair after World War II until it was restored by the National Museum. The Fort del Pilar, as Spain's last stronghold and bastion of defense and economic expansion in the south of the Philippines, which was occupied by the former on December 8, 1720. It shows the Southeast Asian flourishing free breeding in the area and the adverse effects and repercussions with Europeans such as the English, Dutch, and Spanish who wanted to control the economic as well to colonize and Christianize. It focuses on the slave breeding as retaliation and colonizer since it was legal during those times, and sophisticated Asian maritime vessels and tools for war, and the well-organized forces that are plunged for slaves reading the cause of Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao between July to October, called as the Pirate Wind, Pirate Monsoon.
For historical relevance, the historiographic documentary film Raiders of the Sulu Sea is a presentation of the study of history that happened in mid-17th century, and the years after that was still in the line with the Moro-Spanish past. The history of Moro people is a part of the backbone of the historical development of the Philippines. The historical relevance in the southern Philippines and the Spanish colonization is concerned with the line of conflicts in the historical development. Number 1, the political. The Moro people famed for their political power, hold that was gradually assimilated into the jurisdiction of the Philippine government. So number 2 is the social. the resistance of the Moro people against the religious influence of the Christianity that was widely spread by the Spaniard. Number three, the economic, commercial venture of the natural resources fueled the growing demands of slaves from the south that intensity the frequency of the Moro people of the riding expectation. And the last one is cultural. The artistic indigenous craft making of a slave riders through the boats and weapons made and used, and also the pattern of trade that has begun years ago between China and India, long before the entry of Western power.
And now, let's talk about the contemporary relevance of the documentary film. The Raiders of the Sulu represent the study of the history that happened in the Moro Spanish past is vindicated that the different standpoint of two parties was brought forth by the influence of religious ideologies and economic force that drove the clash resistance. Muslim Christianity rivalry is until today suffering in our era. The history of the Moro people and the colonization that happened in Zamboanga City will always be part of the backbone of the historical development of the Philippines. It is a bridge us to the perspective of knowing, understanding, and commemorating the importance of the history of the southern region of the Philippines. The political relevance. The Moro people construct an autonomous political entity in the south supported by the Bangsamoro-based Folklore Republic Act 11054. Relevance in social. The acceptance and acknowledgement for the Moro people with regards to religious differences and ideologies in our modern time. Economic. To combat the freedom to attain and acclaim natural resources against the oppression of big companies and international trading system, and also the tax supported by train law that would only threaten continuing poor areas in South. And the last one is our cultural. The preservation of the indigenous craft and products in South and the continuity of performing indigenous art and beliefs is always way of keeping the culture alive.